Well, hey, everybody, thank you for taking a minute to watch this. We're all here together, all of our pastoral team, our campus pastors, myself, John Camardo, our executive pastors, and of course, Pastor Jerry and Edie. And I want to take a few minutes and share with you a little bit more, give Pastor Jerry and Edie a little bit more space to share what you probably heard during our Sunday services on May 19th. If you didn't get a chance to hear that, go back and watch. It's on YouTube or Facebook at chapel.com. Make sure you hear a bit about what Pastor Jerry shared in that. But wanted to give you guys a chance to be able to share a bit more, unpack a bit more about what was shared on Sunday and some things related to that. So I guess my first question, I prompted this way, is you shared and kind of processed with our church what you've been processing with this crew for quite a bit, with our board of overseers, with our team here. Tell us a little bit about how you landed in this place and how you came to know and be convinced and how the Lord was leading you in this.
Yeah, so the short version is that just prior to COVID, I started, really kind of pondering our responsibility to family, knowing our parents are getting a bit older and that there's no children that live locally there. And so I wanted to be able to, share that responsibility of being accessible to them in this season of their life. And started to think about it a little bit, but didn't articulate it. Then, of course, COVID happened and all of that, and then you're just dealing with all that stuff. But then when Edie and I kind of came up for air, we were at one of our Christ Together National Network deals, and we started talking about it around tables. And then she said, I want to, talk about this more when we get home, because I brought that idea up. And she said, that's kind of what the Lord's been doing, in her as well. And so then we really seriously started to pray about that. We brought, obviously, our siblings into that conversation. Our board of overseers has been in that conversation for a year and a half, probably. You guys, obviously, are campus pastors at a point in that as well, and some outside counsel as well. So we just sensed that the Lord was directing us in that direction, and we're glad to say yes, because ultimately obedience is what we do. Like as disciples of Jesus and as spiritual leaders, that's what we model. We model obedience to the Lord. And so that's, in essence, what we're doing and how we arrived here.
Yeah, it's encouraging. I think we've talked about the idea of obedience being good news. Talk about that, not just about the decision to be obedient, but also the other side of that good news, what that's going to look like and how you've arrived in that place.
Yeah, it's always good news when a follower of Jesus says yes to what the Lord wants, because what we don't know is what he knows. Like we don't always know what he knows, right? And so whatever the Lord is asking of us, it's for his glory and for the good, not just of us, but even the people that we're around. So we actually think it's good for our church to be able to celebrate obedience. That's a good thing, and it always will be. And of course, for us, it's obedience to the word. It's, obviously I just preached on this topic, and it's clear that the word of God speaks to these kinds of things with honor your father and mother. And we also had some, moments in there where the Lord, just confirmed for us what he was saying to us. It was probably 2 summers ago. Edie and I were having dinner at our house, and Tanner was home, our younger son, and he was door dashing, doing whatever he does, during the summer. But he just said, hey, I want to ask you guys a question. I said, sure. He didn't know anything about what we were thinking about, processing. We haven't talked openly with our kids yet, none of that stuff. And he just said, have you guys ever thought about moving back to Georgia? And I was like, we were looking at each other like, huh. And I said, well, why are you asking? And he said, because, and then he named our parents. He calls them by their grandparent names. And he said, because they don't have anybody living there. And they're going to need somebody at some point. And so without, she tried to keep it together, Edie did, and I kept it together pretty good. I put my best dad face on, and I said, here's what I promise you. I promise you that we're actually thinking about and praying about how we'll make sure that they're honored in this season of life. And then I kind of left it there. But then when Tanner was gone, maybe for a DoorDash or whatever he was doing, we were kind of looking at each other like, what? But the Lord's gracious to be able to do that. It's his word we're obeying, but he sometimes just kindly reaffirms that through people, sometimes that are unsuspecting, So that was a really kind of a neat moment. And there's been many of those, actually. That's just one illustration. So
That's great. You mentioned the idea of both feeling really clear on what God's called you to do and also not feeling released from the chapel. I know for all the guys in this room, we've just felt grateful for being a part of that process and being also convinced in how God was leading in this regard. So certainly that's encouraging to all of us. At the same time, though, it's going to be different. You guys moved to Buffalo, I think you said 22 years ago.
Yeah, 22.
Your kids were pretty young. Now it looks a little different. So talk a little bit about the net effect. What do you think that's going to look like? It's not going to be exactly the same, but also we're excited for some of the consistency and stability that will be offered in this next season. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, so what I think is, as we kind of wrestled through this idea of both obeying the Lord and relocating so that we're accessible to both sets of our parents, but also not feeling released yet from the chapel. That's a weird thing to think about those two things simultaneously, isn't it? And so presenting that to our board of overseers and you guys, and we just kind of all prayed, thought, all of that stuff, and then coming to this, what is, maybe a little bit of an innovative way of looking at how we might do this role. The good thing is that for me, I'm not someone who wants to see disruption in people's lives, And I think that what we're doing will actually be not very disruptive to our church, not overly disruptive to our staff, a little different, but not overly disruptive. But the largest actual kind of logistical hardship is on us, and that's okay. Not complaining, not whining about that. Glad to be able to do it. So I don't think it's going to be, overly disruptive to our congregation. And I don't think it's going to be overly disruptive to anyone else. It's just going to be a lot of, me driving back and forth to an airport and understanding schedule and people having to figure out my schedule around some of those things when I'm here. But, the way that that's going to look, as I said, I'll probably be here physically for about a third of the month. And then we'll structure accordingly in that regard. I'm still going to be preaching about half the time. I mean, folks, look around, we're loaded with really, really solid, great preachers. Is that how you wanted me to say it, Leroy?
Yes, thank you.
Just making sure.
I'll pay you later.
So, we're as deep as we've ever been with wonderful communicators, not only people in this room, but people outside of this room. So I'm really grateful for that. Been preaching, obviously, at a 60% clip, still going to be preaching at probably 50%, half the time. So, for most people, they're not even going to notice, to be honest with you. It's not even going to be that felt, So, moving, but not leaving. That's really kind of the mantra that we've had all along. And I just don't think it's going to be overly disruptive. But it'll be different, and it'll be different for us, for sure.
Maybe for a minute, for those listening, as you know, we're a church that has a lot of complexity already. Maybe you think when you comment on Facebook or on YouTube that it's Pastor Jerry who's personally responding to your messages. Maybe we're right now causing a lot of dissatisfaction in that I thought it was him that was replying to every one of those. Maybe just for clarity's sake, talk a little bit about the nature of your role. What is it you're going to be giving attention to? What's consistent in that, both here now and into the future? And then what might look a little different?
Yeah. So I'm going to be, now my role is going to be doing all of the Facebook comments.
Perfect.
So that's going to be great. Can't wait for that. My joy. No, so the role is going to look very similar. So I'm still going to be giving kind of vision, direction to what we're doing as a whole in terms of our ministry. So what I've been doing all along, right? We've got campus pastors at every campus. My role still has to be for the direction and influence of the whole of what we do at the chapel, with campus pastors giving specific attention to what we're doing in various places that we are. And we've got a wonderful group, that's surrounding us like a security detail in here right now, which is fantastic. But I'll be doing that. I'll also still be helping train, coach, develop leaders and investing in the ones that we have. So those that are in this room and those that we're developing, I'll still be doing that. I'll be giving some specific attention. Obviously, I'll still be in the preaching ministry here too, but giving some specific attention to what we're doing nationally still, because that kind of sits with me already with our Christ Together network in particular. We're in a bunch of cities around the country. And so, I'll be doing that still. And engaged in what we're doing on the global side, particularly as it relates to like the saturation church planting stuff. Like when I was in the Middle East recently and when I was in Europe a couple of years ago and all of that, I'll still be engaging on those fronts and what we're doing in Western New York. Because of the shooting of this video, just literally 45 minutes ago or so, we came out of a room with a number of pastors from Western New York. So that will still continue as well. So a lot really that still remains the same. It'll just, I've got a little bit of a different post office box at this point, right?
Yeah. God's been gracious in building this team and allowing for a good structure in that regard. It's also interesting, as you've mentioned a few times, with technology, we're at 4 different campuses, so you can't be in all those locations anyways. And so Zoom and email and Teams and all those things allow for you to be accessible in that regard. We do have a couple concerns we wanted to bring up, most related to you moving back to Georgia and how it's going to impact our team. Number one, are we going to have to deal with a deep Southern accent again? Are you going to reclaim that? It was pretty tough. When you came to Buffalo, we couldn't really understand you. We needed translators. And also, are you going to relinquish your Buffalo Bills fandom, or is that going to remain?
Well, I don't want to answer for Edie. First of all, let me just answer the Buffalo Bills question. I'm ride or die with the Bills. Right. That's just how it's going to be, period. End of story.
The Bills or the Falcons. So.
Right, yeah. It's like I have to choose the Bills or the Falcons. It's pretty easy. It's Bills all the way, right? So that's my team, right? I'm still a Georgia Bulldog fan, Atlanta Braves fan, to all you Yankees fans. But, that's the deal. The Southern accent, probably not going to happen. Can I slip back into it when I'm there? Yes. No promises on her end, though. My little Southern belle here may slip back even further into that. But no, probably I'll still remain with the neutralized accent, Lord willing. But feel free to call me on it if you guys face one too many y'alls. I'll be glad to curb that.
Yeah. Well, in that regard, how can we pray for y'all in this regard?
Yeah, so a couple of different ways. Obviously, logistically, this is going to be, different for us. But we've kind of been invested in the call that God's had on our lives for the whole time, right? She knew when she married me, she knew the call that was on my life, and which means the call that was on her life. That when we got married, we kind of knew this. So this wasn't like a surprise halfway through the marriage where it was like, hey, honey, here's what I'm going to do. We knew this like open eyes, right? So this is going to be unique. My heart is that, first of all, we'd pray that this would be a time of great maturity, growth, and celebration of obedience in all of our lives, right? That for everybody, we want to celebrate obedience to Jesus. That's just what we want to do. And we want to grow as mature disciples in Jesus. And I hope that continues to happen in our church because we've got a mature church, and I'm really grateful for that. I think on a personal level, I'm not so concerned with, I'm going to be hustling back and forth and doing all that stuff, but, it's fine. Like, I'm not so worried about that. I would ask maybe more prayer for her because while I'm moving but not leaving, she's moving and mostly leaving. She'll be coming back with me on occasion, and maybe more than she thinks because I may be begging. I don't know. But this will be, we're relocating for a reason. This isn't out of some knee-jerk reaction or convenience or greener pastures or, looking for some job in Atlanta. None of those things. We're moving there to be accessible to our parents because the leadership of the Lord has asked us to do that. It's real simple. But I would just ask, to be praying for us and for our family. Obviously, we're going to be away from grandkids, from kids, they're adults and we'll be living where they live and we'll be where we are. So all of this will be kind of a new season for us. So we'd really appreciate your prayers along that line. And as we are praying for our church and for this region that we love so much.
Yeah, we certainly will. And I encourage you all that are watching to be sure to continually pray for all that God's doing in that regard. As we conclude, I guess I just want to give you an opportunity to say one more time, because this can be one of those things that you talk for a lot of time and people still get confused. So just maybe close it with one more time, remind us what's happening, what's not happening very succinctly.
Yep. We are moving, but I'm not leaving. Now you need to rewind that. We are moving, but I'm not leaving, all right? This is going to be unique, but we're in a really good position, everybody here, to be able to do that. And I am so thankful for the support of our Board of Overseers, for the support of our campus pastors, for our executive pastors, for our staff team, for our church family during this season as we obey the Lord in relocating to Atlanta. But while I'll still be maintaining my role here at the chapel. So pretty straightforward.
It's great. We love you guys. We're grateful for your obedience to the Lord, grateful for what God's doing in this season.
Yeah, thanks.